Alrighty, can everybody see the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent. I am not a Zoom queen quite yet, but I'm getting there. So bear with me as we go through this. So I want to welcome you guys to the DEI Foundations workshop. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Ann Thompson, and I'm your Director of Human Resources. I will be your host. And then I'd like to introduce you to Deb Alexander, who is actually going to be our facilitator for this session today.
Great, everybody. I see familiar faces, so I'm very glad to see you. Although I see a few new faces as well. I'll give you a moment just to read that. You can read faster than I can read it to you. Okay. And the one thing that I would underscore in terms of my background and what it means for this particular course is that this is called the foundational course. And the idea behind it is that you will see the relationship between diversity, equity, and inclusion and the college and your role and your function at the college. And to me, diversity, equity, inclusion is not something separate and apart from what any organization does or any institution does. They do it and we do it all the time. The question is, are we aware of what we're doing? Are we doing it well? So we can do diversity, equity, inclusion, and we can do it poorly or we can do it effectively. And Albright's made a commitment to doing it effectively. So we began with just a moment to get here, and this is just recognizing that for many of us, this is that we've already had a very full week and perhaps even a very full day. I ran a coaching session, then a strategic planning steering committee meeting, and then a town hall meeting, all before I came to you right now. And I imagine that others have those kinds of stories as well. So mindfulness is about the process of being here now. And so we're just going to take about a minute and a half just to get present. And so I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. We're going to take 3 deep breaths together. So if you'll take the first one, pull it in, and then exhale. The second time, I'm going to ask you to really focus on making your exhale twice as long as your inhale. So again, pull it in and exhale. And then for this last one, take a very deep breath. See if you can bring it up from your diaphragm. And this time, when you exhale, make a sound. It may be a sh sound or maybe a ha sound, but let it come out with sound. And again, you're trying to go at least twice as long as your inhale. So pull it in and exhale. And I'm going to ask you to lift your shoulders up to your ears and then just let them relax back down. And again, up and relax back down. And if you can roll your shoulders back 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and forward 3 times, 1, 2, 3. Make a soft fist with your hands and then display them out. And again, soft fist and display them out. And now let your hands just drop and we're going to wait in quiet for 15 seconds. Just pay attention to your breathing. And if your eyes were closed, just blink them or flutter them open. Look around your space, see where you are in the world. Look at the screen, look at your colleagues who are here on our session today, and be here now. Thank you.
All right.
So if we go to our next slide, anytime that we have a meeting, and certainly anytime that you have a meeting with me, you will have a POP, and a POP lays out the meeting purpose, the meeting outcomes, and the plan, otherwise known as an agenda. And this is just a good meeting, effective meeting tool, and we encourage you to incorporate it into your own meeting practice. So our purpose today is to provide a common language and understanding regarding the college's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and expectations. And so as outcomes, we want you to better be able to understand DEI as it applies to the college's values, priorities, and annual goals. The second, that you have a shared vocabulary and understanding. The third, that you can recognize the multiple dimensions of diversity that exist and that influence how you can see yourself and how others may see you. And finally, that you can use this opportunity to develop ways to communicate and meet the college-wide goal of service excellence. Next slide. So our plan. We're at the opening now. We're going to move right into key terms and definitions. From there, we'll go to service excellence goals, and then your learning, and then any feedback that you choose to offer. Next. Okay. And ground rules, we encourage the video on, especially when you get into your small groups, if you can have your video on for those conversations, that you participate, listen, share, learn, maintain confidentiality. What that means is that sometimes people share personal stories, leave their story with them. Manage your own learning, recognizing that we're not all on the same biological clock. So if you have to step away, we want you to do whatever you need to do to support yourselves. And, it's okay to have a moment of mirth. We can have some fun as we work together today. Next. Okay, so we're going to start with a review of key concepts. And the question is, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? Okay. So I'm going to give you some definitions, and then I'm going to ask you to say, well, okay, I understand that definition, but when I think about it for myself, when I think about it for Albright, here's what comes to mind. And here's an example of how that looks. Okay. So we're trying to get it very concrete. Okay. Next slide. So what is diversity? This definition from Albright focuses on demographic difference as it relates to groups that have been historically restrained, excluded, or oppressed, otherwise known as marginalized groups. That is Albright's definition. The larger definition of diversity is that it's any form of difference, any form of human difference that makes a difference, okay? In terms of how people are seen and how people are treated and how people identify and how people react. So any form of difference meets the definition of diversity. Next slide. The work done by Marilyn Loden many years ago, I think, does a really good job of helping us understand the multiple dimensions of diversity. So what we mean by this is that diversity is not one thing, it's many things. Therefore, there's not a diverse person. We are diverse people, right? Diversity shows up when we show up with one another, because we have things that are similar and we have things that are different, that are important, that either matter to us or matter to others. So in this particular model, she talks about the what she refers to as the primary dimensions of diversity. And that's what we see in the inner circle. And she talks about these as primary because she says, you know what, these matter all the time. And they matter with regard to everybody. So we have age and or generation, gender, which includes gender identity and expression, abilities and other characteristics that have to do with our mental and our physical capacities, race, ethnic heritage, and sexual orientation. So she says, no matter, you know, who you are or where you are, these matter. Okay. The outer ring she refers to as secondary dimensions of diversity. And what she says about these is that, well, they're important, they matter, but they don't matter for everybody. And they don't matter all the time for everybody. So there may be times in our lives where they're more important than others, and there may be times in our lives where they don't matter at all. And it's the combination of all of these that give us very unique experiences. I was saying to the group last week, I said, you know, one of the dimensions of diversity that's really important in terms of how I see myself and how others see me is geographic. I'm a Southerner. I was born in Mississippi. I grew up in Alabama and Louisiana. Okay. So being a Southerner, there are certain, you know, rules around courtesy. And I just thought that was how you were to be courteous. To be courteous means that you speak to people. You speak to people that you don't know. And if you were in the rural, which is where I was, not only do you speak to people that you don't know, if you are driving down the road and you look over and somebody's working in a garden or sitting on a porch, good manners says that you don't know those people, but good manners says that you wave, you acknowledge, you speak to them. If another car is coming toward you, okay, you don't know that person, but when that car gets side to you, as you're facing each other, you turn over and you wave and you acknowledge. That's what good manners means. That's courteous behavior. And then I went to school in New York City. And you know what my good manners got me in New York City? Right? Yeah. It didn't look like good manners. It looked like somebody who was weird. That's what it looked like. Okay. And so that was one of my very first diversity experiences to recognize that, it's different. Now, I didn't come to the realization at that moment that it's just different. Because if I were to walk down a hallway, okay, and I'm walking down the hallway and Anne's coming to approach me, and Anne, in fact, does not turn and look at me and smile and speak. Anne, in fact, looks the other way as she approaches me and walks on by. I've had that experience. The story I make up is that Anne was raised in a barn by wolves, right? Right. Because that's rude behavior, it's discourteous behavior. That's coming from the lens of my Southern tradition. Okay. I had to actually learn that, no, it's different. Difference can just be that. It doesn't have to have a valence to it. Yeah. So what we often say when we experience someone or something that's different, we make it either wrong, we make it evil, we make it stupid or dumb. You know, we say any fool knows, right? Or we say there's a question in terms of your mental ability. That's crazy. That's often how we respond to difference. And what we're saying here is that when we talk about the range of human differences, what we start to recognize is that difference is just that. It's just another way. And we don't have to put a particular valence on it in terms of being good or being bad. Next slide. So you're going to have a conversation. Okay. You're going to look at the wheel. We'll show you the wheel in just a moment. You're going to look at the wheel, and you're going to choose one of those dimensions. Okay. That is important. And what we want you to think about is how does that dimension influence how you see yourself and how you act and behave? And how does it influence how others see and react to you? So let's go back a minute so they can see the wheel and pick a dimension. I was, Ann and I were laughing last week. I was looking at generational. I was like, somewhere along the line, I became a ma'am. When did that happen? Right? At a certain point in, the way in which I see myself, but the way in which other people see and react to me has shifted, and it has to do with my age, and it has to do with now the aging of baby boomers, which that's the group I'm in, right? That's what I mean. How does it show up for you? So take a look, choose one or two of these dimensions, and you're gonna just have a short time to have this conversation with someone else. I have one.
So Deb and I were laughing because I was called ma'am like 3 weeks ago, and I was like, I've met that stage.
I crossed the line.
I crossed the line. I was like, really? Did you just say that? Really? Anyway, so I'm going to put you guys in breakout rooms, 3 people to a room.
So can you show them the instructions just
I'm
before
sorry.
we put them in? Mm-hmm.
That would probably be helpful. How's that?
The next one. Go to the next one.
Oh, the next
I think it's the instructions. No, it's not. Okay, go back. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to have this conversation. You'll have about 8 minutes. And how does it influence how you see yourself, how you act or behave, or how others see and react to you? Okay, so off you go. So I hope you had some interesting conversations, and I hope that it deepened your appreciation for this concept called diversity. To know that diversity is operating for all of us all the time, and whether it makes a difference, sometimes it's just situational, right? I look around and I see some people are wearing glasses, right? Well, that's diversity. Does that diversity matter in terms of your experience at Albright? Probably not, right? So all types of diversity don't necessarily matter. But if I were to say canvas those of you who are parents and you are now in the midst of this pandemic, and not only do you have a full-time job here at Albright, you also have a full-time job at home teaching school. Okay? I would say that type of diversity makes a difference. And you're having a different experience being a parent than I am. I'm a parent, but my son's 29, right? So that's a whole different ballgame. So that's what I mean. We have differences, and when they make a difference, that's when we need to attend to them. But every point of difference does not matter at all times. Great, let's go on to the next definition, equity. So equity is different than equality. So let's first just take a moment to read this. This is Albright's definition of equity. And what I bolded at the end, being equity-minded in higher education means intentionally relocating the cause of disparities and outcomes from the groups who are impacted, traditionally excluded, to the institutional structures and policies that have been created. So we're gonna do a little bit more of this notion of equity-minded. Next slide. So equality means treating people the same, and equity means making sure that people have the same treatment. So they're different, and they are both important. So sometimes we're dealing with equality, and sometimes we're dealing with equity. So in this particular example, what we see is that when we treat people equally in terms of looking over the fence, they're not having the same experience. When we make adjustments based on those differences, then they're able to have the same experience. So we sometimes call it a paradox of diversity. That sometimes in order for people to be treated the same, they have to be treated differently. Next slide. So this conversation you're going to have is about being equity minded. Okay? And so what I want you to think about is what are either currently, this is happening right now, or perhaps something that you're aware of in the past, or something that perhaps is not a disparity, but you can see the potential for it becoming a disparity. But what is a current, past, or potential disparity created by institutional structures, policies, or practices at Albright? Okay. So this one is a trio conversation, and you're looking for at least one example. And so when you come back, we're going to ask for the groups to give us one one example from your conversation. What's one example of a current, past, or potential disparity that is created by the institution? And we're talking specifically here at Albright. They're back? Not quite?
And they're all back. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Welcome back. Oh, and there's my alarm. Welcome back. We want to hear one example, if we can, quickly from each group. And again, this is to start to raise both our awareness as well as deepen our understanding about this concept called equity. Do we notice it when we see it or when we don't? Okay, so open mic, whatever group would like to go first. One example.
Okay.
I'll jump in. I was in a group with Amanda Stahl, and I'm Tim from IT, for those of you who don't know. And one of the things that always comes to the forefront of my mind when I think about equity at Albright is we provide Wi-Fi to everybody at the same level. As an equality thing, everybody at Albright has the same access to the same Wi-Fi, but not all of our students have the same equity. As somebody who comes in with a brand new laptop straight out of high school, or is able to buy a new laptop every year based on their income and the availability of that technology, is not receiving the same advantages as somebody who is inheriting a laptop from an older sibling who graduated, or from a parent, or has a 10-year-old device. They're able to have access to the same resource, but not at an equitable level. They don't have the same ability to use that device.
Okay. And so if we were to continue that example, where does it show up as Albright's structure, policy, or practice that creates the inequity?
Well, there are colleges and even high schools who provide devices to every single student when they come in. And again, from a financial standpoint, I don't know how feasible that is, but if we were truly focused on giving everybody an equitable experience, that might be something that we would look at.
Great. To kind of bring it back to Albright and to your own policies. And now if we would expand it to talk about, and in this current environment of the pandemic, even you would have another consideration, right? Even if you gave everybody the laptop, but they're now working from home, and that impact may be entirely different just because the access to Wi-Fi or even the home environment may not even be conducive to to the learning experience. So again, this is just becoming equity minded, where we say, we think we're being fair, we think we're treating people equally, what are some of the potential impacts of our policies and practices that we may want to attend to differently? Another example.
I'll go next. I do have another meeting I have to hop on at 3 o'clock, so hopefully I can get it in. So one of the examples that myself and Theodore came up with was the lack of equity in selection of students for Acre Scholars. We are at Albright are focused on accepting students of academic promise. So that means you will find students of all varying types of level of experience with academics. And I believe that there is the equal opportunity to take advantage of the Acre Scholarship Program, but they are not equitable amongst the entire student population. So largely the Acre Scholars that are represented are not diverse.
Okay. And so what is it about that the college does in terms of its practices, structures, or policies that perpetuates this?
I would say that it's a policy within, or maybe an unconscious actions by faculty members not reaching out to the students.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying that makes sense to me, that if you're talking, if the practice is that I tend to recommend or contact or inform, students that I know, that I'm familiar with, that I'm comfortable with, our natural tendency is to clone ourselves, right? And so the likelihood is that we just perpetuate what we always have perpetuated.
Exactly, precisely.
Okay. Thank you. Another example, I think we may have room for 2 more. So anyone who has one that they really want to share. Or don't particularly want to share, but now's your time.
Well, I'll share. Andre Forbes-Izugwu and I are both alumni, and so we had thoughts about the curriculum, and I was an English major, and I made the point that, the English curriculum was very traditional, very narrow in scope. I felt I saw other colleges were offering a lot of really, really interesting, divergent classes, like queer theory, queer literature and studies. And so I knew that, I don't know how much has changed. I don't think a lot has changed, but we, as far as the English department was concerned, it was very traditional. And so Andre had a really good point too, from another perspective. Do you want to share that, Andre?
Sure. Thanks, Dawn, for putting me on the spot. So it's this common idea that how you teach students, say, math or science, doesn't change. So there's necessarily a need to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion when teaching these subjects, when that's incredibly incorrect, because just like how Leonette so eloquently brought up, that students are coming from different various levels of their education to Albright, right? And their perspective and how you communicate with them is going to be different. So you need to learn how to communicate to students so that what you're teaching actually resonates with them. So it's not necessarily something that they can't, understand or be educated at an Albright level. It's just the communication to these students are going to be different when they may be students of different backgrounds than what you may be comfortable or used to teaching.
Exactly. So if we continue doing what we have done for the last 30 years, right, it may not work with a new generation of diverse students. My son is actually, one of the things, he actually did a session at Albright last summer, or at some point, while the college was still open, so maybe it was 2 years ago. But anyway, he does Shakespeare as rap. From his perspective, he says Shakespeare was a rapper. And so that's what he does. And what happens is that students actually get excited about Hamlet and about all of those things when it's when they hear it that way, it puts new life to it. So, I was an English lit major too. So, same story, English lit, but in a new container. Okay.
Right.
One more, thank you. I don't want to leave anybody out. So if you have an example, you want to share it, this is your moment.
Hi, Deb. This is Jennifer Braddock and Val White here. Sorry. When we broke out into our group, we had also just identified here recently with regard to our stadium, fans in the stands, because of the change in the guidelines. Week prior, we had not approved an event with fans for our local high school. And then the week later, we had fans in the stands for an Albright event. And a lot of feelings were shared with how it felt like it was a double standard. It wasn't okay for the high school, but it's okay for us. So, there were some groups that really felt strongly about the communication or lack thereof around that topic.
Great. I think so that notion of inconsistency leads to the belief in unfairness, which then leads people to look for an explanation for the unfairness. And sometimes that explanation lands in race, gender, ethnicity, different abilities, all of those kinds of things.
Right. And it just seems that there's just a double standard when it comes to athletics here in this campus. They have their own set of rules, it seems, that they go by. Their rules, and everybody else has to follow a different guideline. In this particular instance, with the high school not being able to play here, which is their home field, and if I'm not mistaken, Reading High School actually owns part of half of the stadium. All of their home games have been played here, since I was in high school, which I'm not going to date myself, but goes, yes, I would be quite proud of it. It goes back to 1976. And so it has always been the home field here. So the lack of communication that occurred with only 24 hours before game time was just unbelievable. Right.
And so it lands as disrespect. I mean,
yes,
that's how it lands.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, it's to build that awareness and for you to have that eye and discernment so that, you don't have to wait until it happens and you get all the negative wash feedback from it. You can actually anticipate how some of these things potentially can land.
Right.
So our last definition is inclusion. Okay. And again, this is Albright's definition of inclusion, and it brings in this notion of belonging. What I want to underscore about inclusion and belonging, but belonging is a feeling, right? And so that is what I would call an intrapsychic experience, right? I'm the only one who can tell you whether or not I feel as if I belong. Inclusion is an action. They're intentional acts to be welcoming, to bring people into an experience where they have a sense of belonging. You can't make me feel that I belong. What you can do is take action that includes me in ways that lets me know that I'm valued, both for who I am and for what I bring and can contribute to the organization. And if you check in with me periodically, you can find out, whether or not that is working, and whether or not there's something more, something different that needs to happen. So I just want you to reflect. We're not going to get into a group on this one, but just to reflect, because it's going to move into our next conversation, is what are examples of intentional acts of inclusion? What is it that you have seen done? What perhaps have you yourself done? What have you seen done by individuals, by groups, and by the institution or other organizations to be intentionally inclusive? One of the things that I always want to raise the awareness about is that there's a difference between assimilation and inclusion. Okay? So when in my diversity, right, let's say it's race, when I come to work with you, okay, if the expectation is that I am somehow going to conform to fit in, to change, to somehow fit in with the organization, that's assimilation. That's not inclusion. Inclusion says that when I show up, something new gets created. You know, you're not exactly the way you were before because you've made some space for some different perspectives, some different ideas, and some different experiences. Things change because the diversity that has been included, has been welcomed, has been encouraged, you know, has shifted things. When we don't truly have inclusion, what we most likely are experiencing is tokenism. So you get to, you know, put me on your in your on your website, right? You know, and you wonder, why is Deb the one we keep seeing over and over and over again in every ad, at every exam? That's tokenism. Okay. So again, you know, just to have that discernment and understand how it may look and how it may land. Okay.
I feel like this is something that we do much better with the students than we do as a faculty and staff. In faculty and staff, I feel like there's always that attempt to assimilate, to make everyone the same, to make everyone fit the cookie cutter mold. But as an example of something that's been done with the students is the Wednesday between session 1 and session 2 of classes. There was that, I can't remember what they called it, but it was basically just a day that they celebrated all the diversity on campus. I was working on campus that day and I didn't get to stop and enjoy any of it, but I saw so much going on, and it was every time you turned the corner, it was something different and a different group. And it really just spoke to the diversity of campus and everybody's different experience and how they wanted to share and embrace that with their fellow students. And again, I didn't see a lot of staff involved. I didn't see a lot of faculty involved in that, but I did see a lot of students. Yes, empowering Albright voices. Thank you, Leonette.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, no, really, really great example. And, you know, here's the thing. In order to you know, attract and retain your students, staff and faculty have to catch up, right? You know, the students can't be, I mean, they certainly can help lead the way. They can help certainly inform and influence, but they can't be it. You know, the college is more than the students. And so, you know, so some of that is, you know, how do we expand and how do we explore, you know, for the whole organization. And so that kind of takes us to our next conversation, which is looking at a poll here. and the poll has this question: did you know? Okay, so either you know or you don't. And so it's saying, you know, did you know these things about Albright? Okay. And so if we can put the poll up. Okay, so did you know that there are 12 core values under the 4 pillars? Did you know that the mission statement says that it's a diverse community of learners? Did you know, so this is what this is about. Did you know? So go ahead and complete the list.
Give you guys about 10 more seconds.
Okay. Okay, so it looks like we have everybody. So the first question is, did you know about the 12 core values under the 4 pillars? And just about all of you say, yes, you know. Now, I'm not going to make it harder for you today, but in another class, I would ask you, so what are they? Name them. Okay. So the thing about values, and what's important about values is values tell us what's good or bad, what's important, what's not important, and they should be influencing and guiding the decisions that we make in our actions and our practices. So, you know, the pillars are integrity, curiosity, connection, and resilience, and understanding that having connection across difference, right? Having equity, which is an aspect of, you know, integrity, and having inclusion, which again has to do with connection and resilience. All of these things are related. So the point of this is to recognize that diversity, equity, inclusion is not something foreign or separate from Albright. It's actually integral to everything that Albright does. We can see that again when we look at the mission statement, and most of you were familiar with that. It starts off by saying that you're a diverse community of learners. So diversity is actually right there in your actual mission statement itself. When you look at the vision statement, there we have the commitment to equity and being inclusive. So again, it's already embedded. We're not talking about something new or separate or different. That you actually have a statement of inclusivity that is, you know, on your website. If you have a question as to where any of this is, it's on your website. You know, it's what Albright says to staff, to the workforce, to students, and to the world about who you are and what you stand for. Okay. Number 5 says, do you know the institutional priorities? And boy, everybody knows the institutional priorities, so that's great. Do you know the annual goals? Most of you know the annual goals. And again, you see the reference to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Did you know that if you have, if you're a member of the staff, or if you're a leader at the college, you have actual expectations in terms of your performance. And one has to do with service excellence, and then the other one has to do with leadership development. And I'm seeing that most of you did not know that. And so if you do have this expectation for performance around service excellence, did you know that that not only do you have this expectation, but that you actually meet the expectation for service excellence by attending this training? So one of the things we do is we track this training, your attendance at the training, so you can get credit for having met this particular performance expectation. Okay. So most of you knew, and those who didn't, now you do. And if you want more information, you can go to the website and see it written there. Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to move into, okay, so to the next one. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So the way in which we give you full credit is that you made it through the whole time with us. So we actually take attendance at the end, and which is where we are. And so you can put in a word or a statement or a learning or a takeaway, anything that was impactful for you today. But if you would just put that into the chat, and then Ann captures that, and then you get credit for your attending this particular session.